Apricorns are the base ingredient for every single Pokeball in AllTheMons. In ATM 10, we have loads of options to automate crops using the traditional methods like growth accelerators, garden cloches, or Ars Nouveau rituals. But as of the current beta version release, none of these methods work for farming them, meaning that we have to go back to the drawing board and figure out what are the new best methods that we currently have available for harvesting Apricorns in AllTheMons. But luckily enough for you, I've done the hard work. I've got a few of the best methods that I could find, and I've structured this video into 3 separate sections for early, mid, and late game. So no matter where you are in your playthrough, hopefully I can introduce you to a farming method that you're not aware of. But before we get started, AllTheMons is in beta, so if any of these methods have changed or updated, I'll try to leave a pinned comment below to help you guys out. So to begin, how do we start farming Apricorns in the first place? Well, in your exploration, you will come across a bunch of these Apricorn trees. From where I'm currently standing, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, just from walking distance from where I've been building. So they are relatively common. The way that you get Apricorns is by right-clicking a fully grown one, and that will drop the Apricorn itself. There's about a 12.5% chance of getting yourself a sprout of that particular Apricorn that you're looking for, and you can always bone meal Apricorns to get more. When you get yourself a sprout, you can either plant it on the ground and grow it up as a tree, which will produce even more of these smaller Apricorns, or you can right-click them on Apricorn leaves to place them as if they were cocoa beans. In total, there are 7 different types of Apricorn tree that you can find in the overworld, as well as the AllTheModium and Vibranium Apricorn that you can find in the other dimension, and the Unobtainium one that you can trade for. However, you don't need to do all that exploring to get your overworld sprouts to begin with. You can craft yourself a Pasture block, which is relatively simple to craft, requiring planks, hoppers, wheat, and then a PC, which is just iron, copper, glass, and smoothstone. Placing this down in your world will allow you to summon in any Pokemon that you've caught, and they will wander around the Pasture block. And using the Cobble Workers mod, if you're familiar with Power World, this might be quite interesting, because certain abilities have different effects. If I spawn in a Pokemon with the ability of Pickup, which you can find quite commonly on the Mons on your screen right now, and if you spawn them in, they will start picking up items. I pop this Zigzagoon in a glass cage, I feel a little bit bad. He will start finding and generating random items and popping them out into the world. Now, if I have a regular chest next to the Pasture block, he'll actually start filling this up instead of just dumping it out into the open. Now, do note there is currently a bug. If you want to upgrade your chest into something a little bit bigger, maybe an iron chest from Sophisticated Storage, the Pasture block does not recognise that as a valid chest output, and the Zigzagoon will just start throwing it out into the open. So a little workaround that you can do with that is just by placing your advanced storage over here and just hoppering that out into this iron chest. And that means that any items that the Zigzagoon finds will always go into this chest, and then into our storage down here. I only had that one Zigzagoon in there for 20 minutes, and this was all the items that it produced. You can see, more importantly, it gave us 5 of the individual sprouts here. That's 5 out of 7, and that is within just 20 minutes of playtime. If I added more Pokemon with that pickup ability, we should be able to generate even more. On top of that, you'll find yourself generating some food items, random balls, and an assortment of discs and seeds, even XP candies. So if you're not a fan of exploring, or you're playing on a server and everyone's taken them, that could be a really good option for finding your sprouts early game. Are you looking to host a server to play AllTheMons or any other mod pack for that matter? Well, let me introduce you to Berrybyte, who have very kindly sponsored this video to give you guys some great offers. They offer really competitive pricing, a super easy one-click setup for any CurseForge or Modrinth pack, like AllTheMons or Stoneblock 4. They've got Ryzen 9 CPUs, which are perfect for modded performance, automatic backups, server locations from across the globe, and a bunch of flexible RAM options. Berrybyte have supported the channel a few times now, and I really do vouch for their services being absolutely brilliant. And right now, you can use my link in the description and code BIGJIM at checkout to get $5 off. Or you can use BIGJIM20 to get 20% off your order. Not only will you be getting yourself an awesome server, but you'll also be supporting me by using my links and codes. So thank you again to Berrybyte for being a continued supporter of the channel. So let's begin with the early game methods of Apricorn farming. One early game method that I think a lot of us will be familiar with are botany pots, and more specifically the hopper botany pots. Hopper botany pots are incredibly simple to make, just requiring a hopper, flower pot, and then the material that they're made out of. If you type in botany pot, you can see every single material. The ones that I'd recommend are the basic hopper botany pots that you can use terracotta to make, stone brick botany pots, because chances are you'll have a lot more access to stone than you will for clay, and then lastly, my favourite one, the deep slate brick hopper botany pot. The main reason I like these is because deep slate bricks don't actually require you to smelt down cobbled deep slate. You just need to make them from polished deep slate and then turn that directly into the bricks. These can be placed on any kind of inventory like a chest or a drawer, and if you open them up, you've now got your inventory screen over here. All you need to do is add your Apricorn sprout up in the top slot and then add dirt in the bottom slot. You then need to add some form of hoe in the botany pot, but here is where my first tip comes in. If you craft yourself a regular stone hoe, you can place it in your crafting table to get the silent gear version. Now this has an interesting property, meaning that when it goes down to 1 durability, it doesn't break. So this will infinitely farm Apricorns forever. And you'll see that the sprout gets bigger and bigger until eventually it gets harvested and all of the contents go down into here or into the chest. So in that case, we've got an Apricorn and 2 of the Apricorn logs. If you hover over the sprout, it will actually tell you how long it takes for this to grow. But I've got even more tips. The first tip is that you need to grab your hoe and just right click the dirt, and that will turn the dirt into farmland, giving you a 10% growth speed bonus for free. You can also switch out this farmland for other bits of farmland that might give you an even better bonus. On top of that, if you apply efficiency onto your hoe and place it back in the hopper botany pot, you'll see here it's got another 40% growth speed just from having efficiency on it, meaning that our sprout is going to grow significantly quicker. And that is probably one of the easiest methods to get yourself started generating these Apricorns. But as you can see, it's incredibly slow. So let's get on to some faster methods. Similar to what I showed you using Cobble Workers and the pickup ability to gain extra items, Cobble Workers has an ability to allow bug type Pokemon to harvest Apricorns directly from trees. If I place down my sprout here and just grow it up like so, and maybe add some more sprouts on the side, I can then summon in any kind of bug type Pokemon here, and whenever these grow up to their full potential, the bug type Pokemon will harvest them and then place them directly in a chest. There we go, so Combee just harvested that Apricorn over there and placed it in the chest. So we've now got an automatic system. The problem is their AI can sometimes be a little bit janky and it does take a while for them to harvest. So this Combee took a little bit of time to harvest that one over there. But instantly did this one. Right, brilliant, thank you mate. But nonetheless, it is a very early game method and it is incredibly cheap because all you need is bug type Pokemon, which spawn absolutely everywhere in Cobblemon. I'd also recommend using bug Pokemon that can fly because I've currently got a Weedle and a Metapod and they're not able to reach these 2 blocks over here. You can see Metapod, bless him, he's trying his hardest, he just won't be able to be tall enough to do that. But if I place some blocks over here, he can now finally reach those bottom ones. The last early game method that I'm going to show you is using the Harvester Pylon. It's not at all expensive, but it does require you go to the nether to get the polished blackstone and the quartz. But once you've got one, you can place it down, pop a chest on top, and set its work area to the maximum 9x9. You can then place a hoe directly inside it, and again, you can use that silent gear hoe. You'll see here it says it's broken, but it's not actually. It's got that 1 durability, and that means it will constantly harvest no matter what. And all of the items will go up into this top chest over here. Now, another little mini note. For some reason, using the harvester, you don't actually get the sprouts, meaning that you probably have to have a good supply of sprouts if you want to go for this method. Secondly, this harvester only checks on its same Y level, meaning that I can't have Apricorns growing up here or down below because it will only check this one level. This is the optimal growing pattern for a 9x9 work area. You'll see that every block in a 4-block area is going to be harvested. Technically, the footprint of this is 11x11 because I've added those extra Apricorn leaves on the edges with Apricorns just on the inside to make sure that we are filling that full 9x9 work area. Now, you can actually speed up the growth of the Apricorn plants using stuff like the Lily Pad of Fertility or the Mystical Agriculture Growth Accelerators. Now, I personally wouldn't recommend this because I think at this point you're probably at the mid-game tier and there are better options available, but I'm just showing you that this is possible. If you want to add growth accelerators, you need to place them in the line of the sprout itself and not the leaf. And that will speed up the growth. But as you can see, it's so small and these blocks are quite expensive. Plus, you need to get higher and higher tiers. So I wouldn't recommend this, but I know that some people do this. Another possibility is the Lily Pad of Fertility. You can actually waterlog these leaf blocks and place a Lily Pad of Fertility on top. And this is actually quite good. It does increase the random tick speed and you'll see that some of the Apricorns do grow at quite a bit quicker. But the recipe for this requires fertile essence, which you can get from a mob farm, and powder of steady growth that you need from nature's aura. And this is definitely a little bit more involved, which is why I'd recommend some of the mid-game methods rather than actually upgrading the early game method. But it's your choice. And with that, let's move on to the mid-game methods. So the first method I'm going to show off in the mid-tier section is the advanced clicker from Just Dire Things. The way that you craft the advanced clicker is by using Celestigem and Ferrocore ingots, both of which can be gotten from getting yourself the Void Shimmer Goo. Now, to get the Void Shimmer Goo, you're going to have been to the end. Dragon's Breath does drop from a couple of the Pokemon, but they're incredibly rare, so I reckon you'll have probably been to the end to get to this stage. And you'll need to work your way from crafting the first level of Primogel Goo to the Blaze Bloom goo, and then finally to that Void Shimmer goo. To get Ferrocore and Celestia Gem, you need to place down your Void Shimmer goo, and you'll see a couple of items cycling through in order for you to charge the goo. In this case, we're seeing Chorus Fruit and Ender Pearl, so I'm going to use an Ender Pearl here, and if you just place blocks of iron and blocks of diamond down, the goo will eventually transfer into these blocks, converting them to Celestia Gem and Ferrocore. This process takes about 30 seconds and it's now completed. So if you mined this up, you'd get raw Ferrocore and you'd get regular Celestia Gem. And once you've got them, you are now able to make the advanced clicker. You are going to need a source of power for this. I'm using a creative energy cube in this instance, but you can plug this directly into whatever power source you're running. And the neat thing about the advanced clicker is you're no longer limited to using that same Y level. You can actually just build a wall of Apricorns and the advanced clicker will actually harvest these as they go. So here we've got a 5x3 space. To set this up, we just need to go into the advanced clicker, press on the render area, and use this offset to position this backwards so that we're facing that middle block of wherever we're trying to harvest. There we go, that looks about right. And then we can just increase the radius to encompass all of these berries. So in this case, I'm going to extend the Y by 1 and the Z by 2. And that should fit everything in. Next up, you're going to need to get yourself the item collector from Just Die Things using the Ferrocore we got before. Place this over any kind of chest or inventory and make sure you've got the render area on. We need to make sure that this is the exact same as this render area over here. And again, we're going to use the offset to make sure that is positioned exactly in the center like so, with the exact same radius settings as it's set on the advanced clicker. Once that's been set up, you can turn off the render area on both machines and set the speed down to 1 tick. You can modify this by left clicking and right clicking to set that back down to 1. And right now that would currently work as an Apricorn farm. The problem is it's still not particularly quick. So you've got two options. You can actually pipe bone meal directly into your Just Die Things advanced clicker. Let's say if you've got a mob farm producing bones that turns into bone meal, and that would actually work to be able to grow them a little bit quicker, but will run out quite quickly. So there is actually a better method. If you get yourself a stone hoe and craft it with itself to get that Silent Gears version that we've been using earlier, and we're going to be enchanting it with the Nature's Blessing enchantment. You can actually use Nature's Blessing 1, but the enchantment itself goes all the way up to Nature's Blessing 7, but in this case it won't actually make a difference on the production rates. You can actually get this enchantment directly by enchanting your hoe with any level above 15, or you might be out and about and find yourself one of these books whilst you're exploring, but either way you need to get this enchantment onto this stone hoe. Once you've done that, you can then actually apply your hoe directly to that clicker, and you'll see the durability goes down, but it doesn't hit 0, meaning that it continues to use the hoe and the Nature's Blessing enchantment, and our item collector is still picking up all of these drops. And this is absolutely rapid. You can see here we're generating multiple per second. It is incredible. And I don't think you'll need much more than this setup. However, obviously we're going to go a little bit faster. Now we've used this Silent Gears hoe trick quite a lot throughout this episode, so if this does happen to get patched, you can always use an AllTheModium hoe. It will obviously require AllTheModium, but this is also unbreakable, meaning that it will do the exact same thing. You could also get Nature's Blessing 7, which means that this action will never take durability off of your hoe, effectively doing the exact same thing that we've got here. However, the next method I prefer because it doesn't use that strange hoe glitch and it's actually faster. For this, you'll have needed to get yourself up to the second tier of Ars Nouveau spellbook. Here's the craft right here. It's not actually that difficult itself, and the novice spellbook is crafted with iron tools and a book. You will also need the following glyphs: the glyph of Propagate Plane, the glyph of AoE, the glyph of Grow, Interact, and then the item pickup. All of these you can see the recipe for if you hover over them and press R, and to craft them you need to get yourself the scribes table and throw the corresponding items on top of it. If you right click the major spellbook onto the scribes table, you'll see all of your glyphs, and let's say we're trying to craft the Interact one, I'd press here, press select, and then throw my items on top. You'll also need yourself the enchanted spell turret. You can use the regular basic spell turret, but this will be significantly cheaper if you use the enchanted spell turret. And you're going to want yourself a source farm. In the top right of the video, I'm going to be linking a video that I made going through a bunch of my favourite source farm designs, and any one of those will work in this example, but for now I'm just going to use the creative source jar. I'm going to quickly go over how I made this spell, which will hopefully help you out in the future if you ever want to expand this farm. The main bulk of this spell is going to rely on the growth glyph. You'll see that if I've just got this basic spell here, touch and grow, it will grow as if we've just bone milled the plant. Now if I put 3 grows in a row, that will actually turn the smallest version of this plant straight into the mature version, which is where the next glyph comes into play. If we add Interact at the end of the spell, it will actually right click the item as if we were harvesting it as normal. meaning that when I click on this, it will instantly pop off like so. And it will do this at quite the cost of mana. Afterwards, we can add the item pickup glyph, which will actually mean that when I right click this, it will instantly go into my inventory no matter what distance I am away from it. Now, if the spell turret was casting this, it would actually store those items into an inventory any side of the turret. And this is where we want to expand over this entire space of the wall. Now, in the basic Ars Nouveau spellbooks, you only have access to these 10 slots over here. So what we're going to do is middle mouse button on this grow over here, and you'll see it will shift all of these items along by one glyph. And we're going to start this off with a propagate plane, along with as many AoEs as we can fit in to this spell. And that will actually cast this spell against a wall. I can actually test this out by shift right clicking on that Apricorn there, and it will harvest all of them and enter my inventory. If I right click this spell directly onto our spell turret that we've got, and make sure that I've got source nearby, and some sort of storage next to the enchanted spell turret, I could supply this with a redstone signal, which would harvest this automatically at the cost of source. And you'll see we generate quite a fair bit per every redstone signal. We can then set up a timer from RF Tools or a pulse timer from Create to do this action instead of manually casting it ourselves. And in the case of the Create timer, we can set this down to the minimum 2 ticks, and it will be producing Apricorns at a rapid rate. Check that out, this is ridiculous. And we can stop it with that lever over here. You can do this in the exact same way with the RF Tools timer by just setting the delay down to 2 ticks and then pressing this button down here, meaning that it will pause whilst there's a redstone signal active. Meaning we can just turn off and on the lever to start and stop this farm. At the mid tier, you might need to tone down your timer and set the delay to something a little bit larger if you're not producing enough source needed. So tweak around with your settings to make sure that you can find something that matches your source production. Bucket Street has also done a video on source generation farms that you can find in the top right of your screen. A lot of those farms are a lot more late game, but they produce a lot more source than the designs I came up with. So if you are struggling for source, maybe check out that video as well. But without further ado, let's check out the rates for this farm. I've got a small applied logistics system over here with an ME disk drive containing source and item storage, along with a wireless connector, bringing this all the way over to here. And I've swapped out the chest with an interface, so that means that all of the items that are being collected are going straight into my ME disk over there. I'm using an export bus and exporting source directly into a source jar, and I've got 2 throughput monitors here, one for the Apricorns and one for source, so we can actually see how much this farm produces and how much source is needed for it. In this example, I'm going to be using the enchanted spell turret, and I'm going to be setting this to the smallest timer delay, meaning that this is going to be running as fast as humanly possible. So without further ado, let's see the rates. I've let that run in the background for a little bit, and you can see the rates here. We're producing 125 Apricorns per second. That is absolutely ridiculous. On top of that, we are using 1,350 source per tick. If we stopped this and actually replaced it with the earth-infused turret, which does require the endgame material of a focus of earth, you will need a mark of mastery for this, meaning you'll have had to have killed the Wilden. If I swap out this turret directly with the earth-infused turret and add the spell back to it, we can now run a second set of tests, which should decrease the amount of source used. And there we go, using the earth-infused turret, we are going to be using a lot less source, only 945. Obviously, the rates of Apricorns will just stay the same. So I guess now is the time to move to the endgame farms. For the endgame method, it is the exact same as this method, we're just scaling it up to a larger size of harvesting. And I've got 2 different versions of this farm, each with their own benefits and drawbacks. And for those wondering, this is the Planarium from Ars Nouveau. It's a brand new block. It's basically a compact machine, but you can actually see what's inside. So to make a larger version of this farm, you're going to need to upgrade your spellbook. The previous design I showed used just the tier 2 spellbook, so you're going to need to upgrade it to the tier 3, and then you'll need to upgrade it to AllTheModium, Vibranium, and Unobtainium. And it's going to be the exact same spell as we had before that you see on screen now. The only difference is that we now have additional slots, and we can use the middle mouse button to move all of our grows over and filling in those extra slots with AoE. If you're using the AllTheModium spellbook, you're going to get 2 additional slots here, so you can move that over. The Vibranium spellbook will give you 5 additional slots at the end, and then the Unobtainium spellbook will give you 10 extra slots, totaling up to 20 glyph slots we can have in our spellbook. Now, because this is just scaling, you don't need to use the Unobtainium spellbook, but obviously I'm going to be showing you those rates because they're going to be the fastest. I'm also going to show you a quicker way to set up this farm using Ars Nouveau itself, rather than having to place all of these blocks in manually. Once you've made the max tier spell for your spellbook, you can copy using Ctrl-C, switch to a different spell, and Ctrl-V. On that copied version, you can then remove all of these glyphs here and just add the place block glyph on the end of it and press create. Once you've done that, if you move your turret forward 1 block, and add that spell to it, if you then place a chest underneath your turret and add 4 stacks of Apricorn leaves for the largest size, you can then give this a redstone signal, which will place all of those Apricorn leaves for you in 1 press. Once you've done that, you can then move your turret back to its original position and use the same exact spell with the place block moving the chest backwards by 1 block, and filling in this with all of your sprouts that you're going to be using. Once that's done, you just need to give this a redstone signal, and it will then place every single one of those sprouts, meaning that you don't have to fill this wall in completely manually like last time. You can then go back into your spellbook and clear the copied spell, and move back to your original spell with the growth, interact, and item pickup, and right-click to set the turret back to the original spell. So without further ado, let's see the rates that you can expect using the earth-infused turret, and the maximum size spell area for harvesting. Let's turn this on, and let's see how much we can produce. So I've let this settle down a little bit. We are producing 1,125 Apricorns per second, and using about 1,600 source per second. Those are some ridiculous rates. I'm looking behind me at 543k. We are surely never going to be using that many Apricorns. Now I could end the video here, but I think there's a variation of this farm worth talking about, and that is the ridiculously large wall that you see beside me. This is actually using a manipulation infused turret, but instead of using propagate plane and an AoE, we've actually swapped this out to use the wall glyph. It's a tier 3 glyph, and then if you follow that up with sensitive, it will target the blocks instead of entities, which is what we're looking for in this spell here. And the reason that we would use the wall glyph is for 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is that this is a bigger harvesting area. We are looking at 27 blocks by 14 blocks vertically. The second reason is that it creates a lingering wall. To demonstrate what lingering does, I've got the exact same thing with a conjure mage block, and you'll see that it actually ticks multiple times. Because it ticks multiple times, we're actually going to change the pulse timer to 60 ticks, meaning that every 3 seconds it's going to cast that lingering wall spell. And you might be wondering why I'm showing this off, because the rates are actually slower than our propagate plane farm over here. And the main reason for that is because we're actually saving quite a bit of source. We're using basically a 1/10 of the source that the propagate plane farm uses. So if you're bottlenecked on source, you can always try to use this method instead. But this variation of the farm is a lot less performant than the propagate plane one. First of all, from an FPS perspective, as you can see, all of these particles behind me are lingering, which lags out your game quite a bit. And because we have a larger surface area that we are harvesting, it does produce quite a lot of lag. So I wouldn't recommend this system unless you're really strapped for source and you're playing single player where you're the only one affected by this. So there we go. That is the best end game farms that I could set up for Apricorn farming. If you found this video useful, please give it a like, and if you're new here, subscribe. And if you've got any suggestions or improvements to the farm, please share a comment below. We can definitely all benefit from some shared knowledge. So thank you again for watching, and take care.